Tonight on The ReidOut.
Some people say, well, they're soft on crime. No, they're not soft on crime. They're pro-crime. They want crime. They want crime because they want to take over what you got. They want to control what you have. They want reparation because they think the people that do the crime are owed that. Bull. They are not owed that.
It's October, and after a weekend of blatantly racist remarks from the right, we know it's that scary time of year. It's met by complete silence from Republican leadership, who surprisingly are in allegiance with most of these comments. Also tonight, Russia unleashes a new round of airstrikes against Ukrainian civilians, the latest act of brutality from an increasingly desperate, losing Vladimir Putin. Plus, Trump's lawyers meet with federal investigators as Trump again says the documents are, quote, mine. And the fallout today from racial slurs caught on tape from L.A. City Council president, who as of right now is the former L.A. City Council president. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jason Johnson, and tonight for Joy Reid, we begin the ReidOut tonight with the shamelessly unapologetic and blatant racism and xenophobia that was on full display this weekend. Not surprisingly. Because, look, the twice impeached former president is doing a traveling roadshow around the country, and most of the offensive commentary seemed to follow him like, rats to garbage. First, it was Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville's casually racist claim that all black people are criminals, which was cheered by the crowd, and got little pushback from Republicans who refused to condemn his comments. Nebraska Republican Congressman Don Bacon suggested that Tuberville should have been more polite with his racism. Makes you wonder what kind of coach he was. Then the next day, not to be outdone, Georgia's Congresswoman said, "Hold my racist beer," and joined in on the racism, targeting immigrants.
Joe Biden's 5 million illegal aliens are on the verge of replacing you, replacing your jobs, and replacing your kids in school. And coming from all over the world, they're also replacing your culture. And that's not great for America.
Yes, STARE's an Indigenous Peoples Day. If you want to talk about replacement, Marjorie Taylor Greene, or anyone else who's complaining for that matter, you might want to take a different look at how you're thinking about these things today. Given the fact that, the entire culture of Native Americans was destroyed so that you could stand there and complain about the next group of people who are supposedly coming in. And even though Marjorie Taylor Greene isn't running for office in Arizona, her presence at the rally shows just how key her ideology is to the current form of the Republican organization. Blake Masters and Kari Lake, who actually are on the ballot in Arizona, have parroted similar talking points, claiming that Democrats want an invasion to remake the country's demographics so they can maintain power. That rhetoric is popular with a number of mass murderers who have targeted black and brown communities in Texas and New York. And while it's popular with the extremist base, it remains repugnant to most normal-thinking Americans who care about gas prices and health care and abortion rights. One independent voter in Arizona recently told the New York Times, quote, "I see the racism. If you are Hispanic, if you are of a different color, it does not sit well with me." Clearly, they have a sixth sense. They see racism. On the same day that Trump was campaigning for Kari Lake, her Democratic opponent for governor, Katie Hobbs, was holding an event at the Barry Goldwater Memorial Park. Yeah, that iconic Arizona Republican with a coalition of Republicans who support her candidacy. And in Colorado, a recent poll showed that Adam Frisch, a Democrat running to unseat Lauren Boebert, is statistically tied. Unaffiliated voters seem to be repulsed by Boebert's rhetoric. At this moment in Cleveland, Ohio, Congressman Tim Ryan and J.D. Vance are facing off in their first debate. Vance has spent the past few months trying to prove that he is true MAGA and not just a poser running for office by telling women that they should remain in violent marriages and enlisting Marjorie Taylor Greene on the campaign trail. While he was busy doing that, Tim Ryan was left to campaign across the state and talk about actual issues that matter to people in Ohio. Independent polls suggest the race is a toss-up 30 days out. Joining me now to discuss all of this is Democratic strategist Stephanie Brown James and Shermichael Singleton, former Republican political consultant, host of Screen Share on Peacock. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me this evening. Look, Shermichael, I'm not going to ask you the traditional question of, hey, Shermichael, you're an African-American Republican. Tell me why so many people in your party are so racist, because we already know the answer to that one, right? What I'm going to ask you is this. In our current political environment, is that effective? Is the kind of racism that you hear from Tuberville, is the kind of racism you hear from Marjorie Taylor Greene, is that effective with anybody other than hardcore MAGA voters? Because it would seem to me that if I'm an independent voter who's not motivated by just anger, I want to hear about gas prices. I want to hear about health care. I want to hear about student loans. I don't care how much you hate immigrants.
Yeah, Doc, that's a really good question. And I think looking at how close the midterms are, I think it is effective with some people in this country who identify as independents or swing voters. I would even go as far to say that there are even individuals of color who may identify as white leaning, and that may also identify with some of this rhetoric, as crazy as that may seem. You would think, Doc, when you listen to rhetoric like that, that Democrats would have a significant advantage. And we're looking at 46, 47% difference, right, within margin of error. Republicans need to gain 5 seats in the House to regain it. They need just 1 seat in the Senate to take it back. These aren't significant margins. And so you have to ask yourself, it clearly isn't just quote unquote MAGA Republicans who are saying, I'm going to vote Republican. There are clearly some other folks in our country who are overlooking these things, Doc, for other reasons, which in my opinion is just as bad as people who are saying, I support this because I agree with it.
Well, that's true. I mean, if you've got anybody out there right now who's like, I'm okay with the racism as long as you lower my gas prices, probably not the kind of person I'd want as a neighbor. Stephanie Brown James, you are a co-founder of Collective PAC, which is an organization that goes out and raises money, helps many minority candidates run for office. One of the reasons I wanted to have you here is because when you're facing this kind of rhetoric, obviously part of the strategy is your candidate has to go out and deliver a message. But the other thing that you have to do is somehow get those people who may be, as Shermichael suggests, somewhat motivated by this rhetoric to think not in terms of cultural animus, but practical bread and butter issues. What are some of the things that you hear effective Democratic candidates saying right now when they're up against that kind of racism?
Well, it's exactly the point that you raised, Jason, and that is that we have to focus on the issues. We talk to our candidates all the time, and we focus on Black candidates that are running on a local, state, and federal level to let them know, listen, it is about the everyday experience of your neighbors, of your constituents. You have to focus on the issues, which also means that it's important to keep your ear to the ground and make sure that, you're not shying away from some of these cultural, racist situations that are happening, which oftentimes are actually targeted towards Black candidates. But you have to make the voters realize that there's a clear choice when it comes between you and what your opponent is standing for. And unfortunately, we're seeing too many times, right now we have a candidate that's running against Marjorie Taylor Greene, and we let them know, show the stark differences. If people want a racist individual representing them, saying that is the values that they uphold, then they should vote that way. But if not, you need to vote my way because I'm focused on the issues and I'm focused on making the country move forward and not move back, which is exactly what so many of these individuals who you saw on these videos are trying to do. They want us to go back so bad that they will use the same old racist, tired language and tropes to get folks thinking back 100 years and not how we can move forward together.
Now, Stephanie, I have some slight pushback on this because at a practical level, racism is a policy position. It is. True. If I'm running and saying I don't like Black people and brown people, what I am saying is that I will promote policies that will harm those people, and I will promote policies that, I guess, in theory, help you over them. The racism just happens to be a shortcut. So how do you convince a white voter? Let's just be absolutely real about this. How do you convince a white voter if one person is saying, hey, I've got policies that help all of Americans. They're going to replace hospitals in Georgia. We're going to improve roads in North Carolina. And the other person saying, I'm going to make sure that you get all that stuff and they don't. How do you combat that? Or is that simply not something you can do realistically with 30 days left in a campaign?
Well, the most important thing is to not shy away from it. It's important that we are calling out these racist candidates and the ads and the companies that support these efforts. That we call them out. But at the same time, listen, this is what, unfortunately, a lot of us are used to seeing. This is the same Republican tire strategy that they always use when they know that they can't relate to voters. But I can tell you that you have a lot of independent voters. You have a lot of white voters that do not want to be put in the same bucket as racist individuals like Marjorie Taylor Greene. And you have to be able to call it out and say, listen, this person is going to advance policies that not only will take back people of color, but guess what? Especially if you're a white woman, many of these policies will impact you. If you're a person who is in the lower middle class economic structure, it's going to impact you. And that is a number of Americans who will actually be impacted by these policies that are not going to actually benefit white people in the way that these folks are saying that they will, but will actually harm them. So we can't shy away from the facts and telling that story. I mean, we encourage our candidates to stand strong, but also to make sure that they don't lose their message in the process as well.